All right.
Welcome to everybody. My name is Chief Fletcher. Like I said, I'm born in Salt Lake City, Utah, but my mother's from the Basque Country. And we were, after my father passed away, who was not Basque, we got very involved with the Basque culture. There's a Basque community in Salt Lake City itself, and we had lots of relatives in California, and still have a lot of relatives in the old country. So I got involved with the Basque Club in Salt Lake City, and they were very much into cooking, and I was very much into eating. So I had to move to California after I graduated from college, and liked good food, but couldn't afford to go to restaurants all the time, so I had to learn how to cook it for myself. The life of the sheepherder, the sheep man, is very similar to the cowboy. You're out on the range, living on the horseback or mules, walking and walking and walking and caring for animals. And so even if it was sheep and cattle, a little different on how they graze and how they're raised, there was a lot of similar experiences. And so it's kind of a neat melding this year to have the Basque culture featured along with the cowboy culture. My friend here, Jean-Pierre, he's also American born, but parents are from the Basque Country and raised in the Basque culture. He also plays in the band along with me. And he's originally from Bakersfield, California, but he and his family owned a Basque restaurant in Fresno, California. They wanted me to do a Northern Basque influence because most of the Basques here, the two restaurants that were in town, were more of a Southern Spanish side influence. And the star, of course, is a kind of an old boarding house style, American Basque food. It's a little bit different than traditional Basque food. And they wanted me to do a more northern influence since my mother comes from the French side of the Pyrenees. And I said, well, we can do that, but I want to show a little bit of everything. Even though there's some big urban areas, the culture itself is pretty peasant culture. A lot of farmhouses and most of the food traditions and everything, even though they live in big cities, still are based on farm culture. And so there were lots of fruit, lots of vegetables and everything in Basque cuisine. And the problem was there was no refrigeration in the old days. So with their fruits and stuff, they would eat as many as they could when it was fresh, but they had to do something to preserve the fruit. And a lot of the farmhouses would preserve it in alcohol. And so that's why we decided to feature that for our dessert today. One, it's kind of easy to do. It's going to be marinated peaches in rum, which is in the northern part of the Basque Country is the alcohol of choice, usually for baking and cooking. It's either that or anise, Pernod Ricard, those kind of things. And then a special cream that they make, and then usually served on Basque cake that they make is more similar to a pound cake or something like that, or an angel food cake is another type. We're going to use little shortcake cups just because it's easy and decorative and easy to serve. So but there was some that they would keep. They did the peaches, they did pears in more like a mucha, an eau de vie they call it in France, and that's pretty famous, Pear William liqueur. And they did cherries. Cherries were very big in the Basque Country, and they would preserve that in some in wine, some did it in brandy or rum or whatever they had handy. So Myers is probably the closest rum that you can get to it, the same flavor and stuff. It's a little bit different, but we'll use this and we'll have to just suffer through it. So we'll put this in here, and this is going to marinate. We'll turn this over a few times before we serve it. Well, some people have taken it a step further, and they actually add a little bit of vanilla pudding to it. So we're gonna make it that way, and that's going to be our topping for our dessert.
For peaches.
So it takes you do half portions of heavy whipping cream and half. Now, if you get the right percentage of regular whipping cream, that usually is about the same thing, but they're not always the same percentage of cream. So if you do it this way, you're pretty safe to have the right mixture. And you can do this with a hand mixer or something, and if you're really old-fashioned, you can do it with a whisk and a bowl, but I prefer this. Now when it starts to get a little bit thick, we're going to add this Jell-O instant pudding to it, and that'll give it a nice creamy texture and stuff when we... And we'll add a little bit of vanilla to it. It doesn't take much because it's pretty strong. The extract is very concentrated in flavor. We're going to speed it up a little bit now. We take it out from the mixer, and add the brandy and just little by little and fold it in by hand so it doesn't go back to liquid, because if you're not careful it'll all just fall apart and go back to liquid. And then we'll chill it in the fridge until we're ready to serve it for dessert. Did it, and grandparents did it in the old country. Everybody made cheese at home. Wanted to do a newer style dish, some more new cuisine. So we're going to do a ground veal stew. In the Northern Basque country, there's a very famous pepper now, a spice pepper called Piemonte or Espelette peppers. And they sell it at serveral, we sell it at Williams Sonoma, and it's very, very expensive here in the United States. But they've tried to develop this whole festival for the last 50 years in this little tiny town in the French Basque country, and it's all built around this pepper. So they invented this stew about 50 years ago, and it's kind of in a new cuisine. So ground veal stew with onions and peppers and different things in it, plus featuring the little ground dried pepper, the Piemonte Espelette. We'll show you that. So I think we're going to start with the veal stew now. We're going to start over here at the stove. So we're going to start by, we fry the veal a little bit. This is ground veal. Now, traditionally, in the old days, it was done with, in the old days, 50 years ago when they invented the recipe, it was done with very, very small diced veal, because they didn't grind their meat back then. They didn't have good grinders except for sausage and stuff like that. So, it would have, but it got to be too much work. So they changed the recipe to do it with ground veal now. And it's very lean, doesn't have a lot of fat in it, so just a little bit. So, and then we'll get that frying a little bit in the pot, and then we'll add the vegetables to it and stuff like that. And then you'll have it's going to boil down a little bit, and we'll go through that. So, but it's become pretty popular now. Veal, a lot of people are eating lean. But they do put it in the freezer sometimes, where they have the turkeys, and we can adjust it later after we taste it, see what we like. But now, one distinction in Basque cooking. On the northern side of the Basque country and in the province of Navarra, they tend to use a lot of black pepper. In the other provinces, they tend to not, and they prefer red pepper to that. So they cook with a lot of pimentos, paprika, and things like that in the province of Vizcaya, Guipúzcoa, San Sebastián, those areas. But in north of the border, there's less red pepper, a little bit, fresh red peppers, and then that Piemonte Espelette now is getting big. It's a little less spicy than red pepper flakes, so we'd use a little bit of more. If you don't like a lot of spice, then you just put a little bit, and that gives you the flavor, at least a little bit of the flavor. So they also make all kinds of other products now with this pepper. So they make pepper ice cream, they make pepper jelly, pepper tomato sauce, like ketchup, just anything to promote their product and get it bigger. But it's only allowed to be called Piemonte Espelette if it comes from 6 little villages in this little area right there. They make similar products other places, but they can't put that name on it. You know where it's coming. That's why it's kind of pricey too, because it only comes from that one area in the Basque country. So we're going to add the vegetables to the veal now. The veal's browned a little bit, and we're going to throw the peppers and the onions and all those vegetables in there. A little bit of water. A couple of other spices, the bay leaf, of course, and a couple other things. The Piemonte Espelette we'll put in there. And then it's going to steam itself. We're going to kind of braise it or almost like stew it in here for a while till we're ready to eat it. So we get a couple cups of water. Yes, and we'll turn down the heat a little bit so it doesn't burn. This is to show you how you can take this veal stew and make it a full meal. A little bit later, we'll stick those just on top of the meat inside the pot, and that'll steam those potatoes with the flavor and everything that's coming from the meat. And you serve that on the side as steamed potato and your little salad, and you've got a whole meal right there. In a few minutes, we'll actually take the lid off so that it'll reduce and we'll get rid of a lot of liquid. So we've got less juice when we serve the.
Yeah, that's right. I love both places.
Then we wanted to do some kind of an example of what you would have gotten in a Basque hotel 40, 50 years ago if you were a herder staying in a border or something like that. And when the Basque cooks came here to the United States, they had to deal with whatever ingredients were around here. They couldn't get a lot of stuff that they were used to at home, so they adapted their recipes to what was available here. Short ribs were something that was very, very healthy, hearty, and very easily done. And it served double purpose when you cook something like that, because to cook the ribs, you start out by boiling it and making with vegetables and stuff to give flavor to the meat, but you're also left over with broth that you use for your soup for the next day. So we're doing that today, both. I went ahead and boiled all the short ribs in the vegetables and stuff ahead of time so they'd be cooked. And then we have the broth that we're going to make the soup from. And so we're going to reheat those short ribs. They're already cooked. We'll reheat them up with some peppers and onions and stuff like that. We'll make a little sauce in that. Got a little bit of flavor, a little bit of salt and pepper already. Go ahead. Throw them in here. We're going to go ahead and make the sauce right there in the pan with the ribs. So the other, nope. So this one is the red peppers, green peppers, onions. Again, I melded two recipes together. In the old days, the Basque Hotel would have served this in a tomato sauce. To do it a little different, I come up with this recipe with just peppers and onions and stuff like that. It comes down to a little different kind of sauce. They're on high now until we get some water going, and then we'll turn it down. Yeah. Cut up into little pieces. Yeah. A lot of times it's nice to, when you're serving it to your family, see if you can find these and bring them out, because they are very sharp and they don't get soft when they cook. Thyme is also a very big herb in the French Basque country. They don't use it so much on the Spanish side, but on the French side, thyme is what they use. On the Spanish side, they use more parsley. And now this is warmed up pretty good, so we're going to go ahead and put some wine in here. Yeah. Become the basis for the sauce as this all melts down. We'll put for a little French Basque as we're doing the thyme and everything, put a little black pepper in here. We'll cover them and let them warm up and simmer for a little bit. And these are just going to keep cooking until we're done. So, do we want to have a glass of wine or something while we're waiting? Sure. All right, we're ready for the ribs. If anybody wants a rib, you're going to ask for a half or a whole. We'll cut it here. Put the meat in and a little bit of juice.
There you go.
Watch a football game. Have a great dinner.
With the leftover broth, we're going to make a traditional vegetable soup that would have been served in a farmhouse in the old country or in any of the Basque hotels here. And you probably had similar soups here if you've eaten at the Star Hotel or at the Biltokis when it used to be around. It's just a cabbage and other vegetables soups. And you can adapt this at home with whatever vegetable you want, really, whatever you like in your soups. But we just picked a few more traditional ones for us. So we're going to make 2 pots of soup, so one we'll make kind of spicier and one we'll do a little less. I went ahead and boiled all the short ribs, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Boiled these for 5 hours in a pot of water with vegetables and seasonings and things like that show on there. So then I strained all the vegetables out of the stock, and this is the stock that's left over. And what I like to do is put that in the fridge overnight so that the fat all rises to the top and congeals. And then it's very easy to take the fat out when it's cold. So we're going to start by taking the fat out, and then we'll start heating the stock on the stove. In the meantime, we do need some onions and some peppers, or not peppers, onions and carrots and some vegetables cut up. So who would like to volunteer here? Some space here. The soup is, farmhouse style, and they would have just done whatever they picked from the garden that day, whatever was in season. It would be variable. Sometimes they would put potatoes in. I'm not going to put potatoes in this particular time. Cabbage was very big because it grew easily, and you had several, cabbages during the year that would grow. Leeks are huge in the Basque Country. We'll throw the vegetables in, and it'll be hopefully ready by lunchtime. The onions are these are onions from this one. So, about the same size. Let me see. We need some onions. And now they have white wine, which this is one of them, chocolate, made in closer to the coast, not far from San Sebastian. And then the other thing that's very big in the Basque Country is cider, hard cider. So what I like to do with the broth that we get, or the stock that we get from whenever I boil the meat, we want to get a little bit more depth to it sometimes. Sometimes it's really gelatiny, or it doesn't have a lot of salt in it unless you put it a lot when you cooked it. So we adjust it a little bit. I use chicken base or beef base, and instead of adding salt to salt it, I usually use chicken base almost anything that we cook, because instead of just adding salt, you're adding flavor as well. And chicken base usually has a lot of salt in it. So. Now this is pretty salty. I'm going to just put a little bit more in. I'm going to add a little bit of beef base for some depth to the meat, because you taste it in the front of your mouth, but you want to taste it in your whole mouth. You want to have it explode in your mouth since you've got fresh stock. We're going to kind of just split the vegetables we cut up between both pots. Again, there's really no quantities or anything. It's just the vegetables you like until it's just underneath the top of the liquid so that it's all completely submerged. Now some people would put green beans in a little bit later, like we were talking about, because they cook a little faster. But since we're going to eat here pretty quick, we'll just cook it all at the same time. The beans add a different level of flavor. There's a whole different flavor to the soup. So you'll go to the Star here, used to be Biltoki and stuff, they would make a cabbage and vegetable soup, but they wouldn't have beans in it so much. It was more from our side of the border and stuff like that. And they don't usually put potatoes in. We're not putting potatoes today, but that's another option. And it'll make your soup thicker and more hearty, like in the winter and stuff. In the Basque Country, they would have had that peasant soup with potatoes because it gave you some sustenance, and potatoes grew fast and easy. So I'm going to go ahead and put a large can of tomato sauce in these. Just kind of stir it up and let it boil for a while. And
When you say boil, do you want it rolling boil all that time, or do you want it?
so we bring it to a rolling boil and then turn it down and simmer it. Yeah. And then what I like to do is do it with the lid off, so we lose, so the juice still reduces some, and all that flavor concentrates inside. For those of you that make soups and stews and stuff like that, you all know what this is. These are bay leaves. It's kind of the basis to adding flavor to soups and stews in the Basque Country, in France, Italy probably too, Greece for sure. So we're going to put a little bit in the soups and in here with the ribs. He's coming to do pinchos and tacos. Here we go. Salute everybody. Amaika takwa. Amaika takwa.